Over 1,000 years ago, a group of people decided to embark on a journey that would change the course of history. These people, whose names have been lost in time, were part of a society in the northwest of the Indian subcontinent, in what is now known as the regions of Punjab and Rajasthan. They were artisans, blacksmiths, and musicians, people from lower castes who lived under a strict social system and who likely felt trapped by the limitations imposed by their environment. Thus began their exodus, a journey that would lead them to become one of the most enigmatic peoples in the world. The Gypsies, or as they call themselves, the Romani. If this is your first time on the channel, subscribe now so you don't miss any important content about the darkest chapters of our history. The beginning of the journey in the 10th century. The territories of India were in a constant state of turmoil. Foreign invaders, including the Persians and Turks, were ravaging the northwest regions of India, and many people were forced to flee in search of safety. The ancestors of the Gypsies were part of one of those groups who, faced with the threat of losing everything, opted for movement instead of submission. In their land, they were already a people who moved from one place to another, earning a living as blacksmiths and musicians, but now their displacement had taken on a new, clear purpose: to find a place where they could live in peace and prosper. Historical records of this migration are scarce, but genetic and linguistic evidence tells us that the Gypsies' journey first took them through Persia. For centuries, this nomadic group traveled through Persian lands, adopting and adapting elements of the local culture into their own traditions. Their language, which we now know as Romani, began to incorporate Persian words, and its structure was enriched with foreign influences. Life in Persia offered them a temporary respite, but, as often happens in their history, the circumstances would soon change. New horizons. The Byzantine Empire. By the 13th century, the Gypsies continued their migration westward, crossing the Caucasus Mountains and entering the vast territory of the Byzantine Empire. It was there that they became more visible to the eyes of the chroniclers of the time. They were known as the Atinganoi, a term that seems to have mystical connotations and reflected their nomadic nature and their skills in healing and divination. The Byzantines, intrigued by these foreigners who seemed to have no fixed home, began to see them as mysterious and exotic. Throughout Byzantine cities and towns, the Gypsies offered their services as blacksmiths, musicians, and healers, and their fame began to grow. They were attributed mystical powers and special abilities, which presented them with both an opportunity and a risk. On one hand, they were welcomed for their talent in music and dance, which earned them a place at local courts and festivals. On the other, their enigmatic character and spiritual practices made them targets of distrust and fear. The crossing into Europe. A new adventure. As the Gypsies settled in Byzantium, it became clear that their nomadic spirit and quest for opportunities would not allow them to stay still for long. They began to move westward, penetrating the Balkans and slowly into Central and Western Europe. They reached Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary, temporarily settling in each place, adapting to local customs, and learning the local languages, but always maintaining their identity as a people who belonged to many places but none in particular. In their travels through Europe, the Gypsies often presented themselves as Christian pilgrims seeking refuge and protection. In many places, they were received with hospitality and curiosity by Europeans who had never seen a group of people with such distinct traits and customs. They were welcomed at first, intrigued by their music and artisan skills. However, over time, things began to change. The Gypsies, always on the move, were difficult for the sedentary communities of Europe to understand. Then, suspicion arose. Who were these foreigners who seemed to belong nowhere? Why did they prefer to move from place to place rather than settle down and live like the rest of the population? Stories and rumors about them multiplied. Some said they came from Egypt, which is why in English they were called Gypsies, a deformation of Egyptian. Although this myth was false, it contributed to the mysticism surrounding the Gypsies. The price of being different. As the Gypsies settled in different parts of Europe, attitudes toward them began to turn hostile. The Gypsies, with their itinerant lifestyle and distinct customs, did not fit into the medieval European societies that valued stability and integration. Laws began to emerge that sought to control their movements and force them to assimilate, or else leave the territories. In Spain, the Catholic monarchs enacted laws that required the Gypsies to abandon their nomadic lifestyle and settle permanently. They were required to adopt local dress and customs, and those who did not were harshly punished. However, the resilient and adaptive Gypsy culture managed to survive in each new place. The Gypsies adopted elements of local culture but always preserved their essence. The Gypsy art and resilience. Despite persecution and marginalization, the Gypsies managed to leave an indelible mark on European cultures. Their music, dance, and art became an integral part of the traditions of the countries they lived in. In Spain, for example, Gypsy music merged with Arab and Spanish influences to give birth to flamenco, a passionate style of music and dance that reflects both the pain and joy of a people who have witnessed centuries of persecution and struggle. In addition to music, the image of the Gypsy as a divine or mystical figure became popular in Europe. In many markets and festivals, the Gypsies offered their services as fortune tellers and palm readers, perpetuating the image of a people with special knowledge of fate and the future. This image, although partly constructed by popular imagination, also reflects a truth. The Gypsies have maintained traditions and knowledge dating back to their origins in India and Persia. The 20th century. Darkness and light. The Gypsies' journey through Europe has not always been easy, and the 20th century brought one of the darkest chapters in their history. During World War II, the Gypsies were persecuted by the Nazis in an attempt to exterminate them, which resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands of people in what is known as the Parajmos or devouring. This tragedy is a fundamental part of Gypsy history, but it is also a testament to their resilience and survival. After the war, the Gypsies continued to fight for their rights and identity in a Europe that still viewed them with distrust. However, in recent decades, many Gypsy groups have started to gain recognition for their cultural contributions and history. The 21st century. A people in motion, a legacy that endures. The history of the Gypsies is that of a people in constant motion, but it is also the history of adaptation, resistance, and the search for a place in the world. From their origins in the lands of northwest India to the streets of Europe's great cities, the Gypsies have been witnesses to and participants in history. And although their path has been marked by suffering and persecution, it has also been filled with music, art, and a deep connection to their roots. The history of the Gypsies is not just a physical journey across continents but a cultural and spiritual odyssey that continues to inspire and intrigue to this day. If you have made it this far, you have learned something new with our stories. Subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos. Together we can discover and remember the truths that history often tries to hide.